Okay, today we're at Teal Park in Horseheads, New York. And you may be wondering, what does this have to do with trains? And I can tell you, nothing. But in this neighborhood is where the seed of my love of model trains and trains was planted. And if we look over here, we have my very first model train engine that I got in 1970 when I was 3 years old. She still runs, a little rough around the edges, but I still have her. So now we're at the old Agway in Horseheads, New York, where I used to come when I was about 9, 10, 11. I would sneak down here when the train would come through, and I would hang out with the crew without my parents knowing, I might add. And I became pretty good friends with one crew member whose name was Dwayne, who took me under his wing and looked after me while I watched trains. When I'd come down here, I'd always wear an engineer's hat, available at Sears at the time, with a patch on it that said Nickel Plate Road. It was probably backwards on the camera. And my friend who worked on the train saw my patch and says, "How come you don't have a ConRail patch?" And I said, "I don't have a ConRail patch, but on a hat." So he had one on his jacket. He reaches down, tears it off his jacket, and says, "You got a patch now." And I still have that patch today on another hat that my mother sewed for me. At this crossing, at the other side of the Agway grain mill, every summer a friend and I would come down here, and at this crossing the James E. Strait show would back up and unload right here. Of course, there's a lot of kids hanging out here watching them unload, and my mother wasn't too thrilled about me going down here because she didn't want me to be around carnival people, which there really wasn't many around, honestly. It was just crews unloading the train. And I would spend a lot of time in this spot where they would unload the hopper cars of grain. And the guy who unloaded it didn't seem to mind us being here, but didn't really like talking to us either. Sadly, the Agway is gone and everything's shut down. I don't even know what they use this for anymore. So I used to sneak down here for about a year, with my parents not knowing. I'd tell them, "Hey, I'm going to my friend's house." Of course, I wouldn't go there. I'd come out down here instead. And when I was 11, my father got a new job in the Finger Lakes, so we had to move. And I remember the last night we stayed in Horseheads, my uncle was staying with us, and I said, "Can you take me down to the tracks so I can say goodbye to the crew?" So my uncle drove me down, and the crossing behind me, we came down here, and I said to the guys, "I won't see you again, I'm moving to Penyan." And he said, "Well, it's your last night, you gotta have an engine ride." And so when they got done switching the cars at the grain mill, they put me on the engine and took me down to a huge warehouse facility just north of here. And at the crossing is where I got off, and I never saw the guys again, but it was one memorable night getting a free train ride. Here is the crossing where my train ride would end that night, and my uncle picked me up here. And we're just north of Horseheads at a very large warehouse, which now I believe they unload cracking sand. And look, we have train cars in a video about trains.